everybody. This is Rachel Gardner, and you are listening to Spiritual Musings of a Popcorn Brain. Hey friends, so right now we are going through a season that I'm calling God Stories. And these are friends, some I've known a long time, some I haven't known quite as long. Some are very personal friends, some are church friends. They're all great people, and they all know Jesus personally, and they all have a story to tell you about a way that he spoke directly into their lives. And my purpose in doing this is so that any of you who think that you have never had that experience, or you know that you've never had that experience, to hear directly from God, from Jesus, I want you to start to recognize all the ways in which he might talk to you, so that if he has talked to you and you didn't recognize his voice, you'll start to hear it. And if he's never talked to you and you want that, then you can ask him, and when he does, you will recognize his voice. I hope that you are encouraged. Today we have the final section of the conversation with Ron and Deb Moss. And this part of the conversation is really about listening to God. So I hope you are encouraged.
During this 2.5 years, though, I think one of the things that, even though we may have been confused, or we felt like we didn't know what to do or even how to pray, you and I, even when it was terminal, incurable, you got a year to live, we never lost hope. And hope, generally speaking. And when I've reflected back on that early time when we were just, because that was right at the time I was retiring. And so our plans, we had all of our travel our plans
Right.
were all made. And we had
Right.
been waiting and waiting and waiting for me to retire.
Yeah.
Because Deb had retired years before that. And so we were ready to go and start doing our retirement checklist. And nowhere on that was cancer. And so suddenly our life, like I think a lot of lives are, moved 180 degrees, the opposite direction. And so we didn't want to lose hope, so we didn't quit praying. And while during this we didn't necessarily hear or feel in our own day-to-day experience God's voice or God's presence, I think part of it is that we were letting too much. We were letting the words incurable and no chance, and there's a finite end to us, to my life, therefore to us. I think we were letting the noise of all of that keep us from really hearing from him. And as time went on, I think we both arrived at a point that we're fighting hard, we're not losing hope, but we probably can't do this alone. And as we independently became fully dependent on him,
Right.
and just said, God, you've given us lots of gifts. You've given us a lot of the fruits of the Spirit. You've given us perseverance. You've given us joy, and there were so many things that we could identify that were from him, but not necessarily directly in response to what we were wrestling with and trying to pray for. And
For me, and I don't remember an exact moment, but about 2 years into the journey, I realized that I was negotiating with God in my prayers. I was saying,
That's hard not
come
to
on, God. You know, it's so easy to say, I trust in your plan. I trust in your perfect timing until you are deep in the weeds.
Right.
And, you know, from one week to the next, you don't know if you're going to be at home or in the emergency room or in the chemo clinic or if he's even going to be here. And I just said, he is such a warrior for you. We are such a team warrior for you. You know, how don't you want to keep him here? Don't you want to, you know, this doesn't make any sense that we're going through this. And we did always say we were both going through it. And sometime around the 2-year period, I realized I'm not turning it over. I'm negotiating.
Yeah.
And a peace just settled over me.
Yeah.
And I just said, okay, I really do trust your plan and your timing. And I know it's perfect. And whatever it is, you know, let go and let God. I'm going to let you have it, God. And it made a big difference. And it's not to say there weren't still very difficult days, nights, weeks. But something turned the switch. I don't know what it was, but.
And I think that in what I call my quiet time on the porch every morning, that increasingly moved from worrying about that I was praying correctly to just having a conversation.
Right.
And almost letting God determine what was important that day that we were talking about. And then it moved to worrying less about the words and more about just sensing his presence.
Yeah.
And that became our prayer life, really, or my prayer life. And sensing his presence came about for me when I kind of moved toward being fully dependent. And within a matter of a very few months after we both became fully dependent, I was in full remission. And so, I think that it's really easy to hear and feel and accept and live the noise of this world, of the unkingdom.
Yeah.
It's louder than anything that we might experience or sense from the kingdom. But the idea is for the kingdom to be on earth as it is in the kingdom, as it is in heaven. And so I think we both began to experience just by, and we hear, and I've always loved be still and know. And I think there's so much to that. But I think silence is required in a way to hear his voice.
Amen.
And that has a lot to do with being still and knowing means being still so that you can, in my mind, eliminate or muffle the noise of this world. And so when we began to be able to feel in that sense of hope all along, that if we would just be still long enough, to let heaven come to earth as we were eliminating all of the noise of the world, whether it was the term incurable or it was the garbage can being rattled, whatever it was, just don't let it get your attention. And so I think we have found we have to be intentional about not hearing the noise of this world.
Yeah.
Not hearing, because Satan is busy trying to keep us from having a conversation, trying to keep that direct sense of God's presence. He wants to jam that up pretty well. And so, it's kind of I like when I feel myself slipping a little bit with starting to hear the noise of the world again, I'll tell Satan to just get out of the way. And then I get excited because I think, man, this is a chance to beat his butt. And I read something not long ago that I love, that I'd like to share, and that's when, because I think we overthink and overwork in trying to pray and connect with God, and we don't just let it go, just let it, and exhale.
Rest in His presence.
And rest in His presence.
Well, thank you guys so much for sharing and for being on my podcast. I really appreciate you guys.
Rachel, thank you for doing this. This is such a, we see God in this too, and we hear God in this, even though it's been our own voices most of the time, but we're just so grateful for you doing this. And, when we encounter people like you, that are desiring for others who have just started to wrestle with their faith, or whose faith has been strong but they feel like is failing. You're a vessel. You're a vessel through which any number of listeners can give pause to where they are and maybe be still to actually hear His voice when we're completely still and quiet.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Yeah.
So these past few weeks, I have been dealing personally with one of my children in the hospital. And next week, I'll be sharing some amazing things that God has done through this whole ordeal. I hope you have been encouraged by what you've heard today, and I hope that you will be encouraged by what we share next week. If you find this podcast encouraging, then please follow or subscribe. And if this specific episode was meaningful to you, please share it with somebody so that they can be encouraged too. And I also want to let you know that I have another podcast where it's just me doing my daily Bible reading from a one-year Bible. So if you would like to join me in that quiet time each day, then I have the link for that also in the bottom of this episode. And it's called Scripture for Life.